Hosting foreign dignitaries always carried risks. Their political enemies might see these moments as opportunities. If things went well, it would result in stronger ties with Sheo. I know you might not want to do this, but you have to. That is why I am here asking. Maomao fell into a sullen silence, sipping her cold tea. She had heard enough that she could no longer pretend to ignore the situation. Incidentally, this was Master Jinchi's idea. That bastard, Maomao thought. The words came dangerously close to escaping her mouth, but she somehow forced them back down. Jinchi's social status meant he couldn't personally get involved in just anything. However, Maomao wished he would consider those he troubled through others. I assume I will be compensated for this work, Maomao said. Leave the negotiating to me. Lahan thumped his chest, and the light glinted off his spectacles. If nothing else, Maomao knew she could trust him with this. Chapter 9 Empress, and so the consort became an empress. Jyokai was now formally married to His Majesty. It was important she made that clear to those around her. In battle, you could minimize casualties if you had an overwhelming strength advantage. If a consort with a rank similar to Jyokai had given birth to a son at the same time, there could have been a bloodbath. However, it was Jyokai who rose to become empress because she gave birth to her child before Lihua produced her own male heir. Lihua's family lineage made her more than qualified to be empress, but she had borne a son before and still hadn't been elevated to that rank. There was good reason for this. First, no one knew how long her child would live, but the lineage itself presented a problem. The emperor seemed to be avoiding marriage to someone too closely related to him. In the past, close relations had weakened the imperial bloodline. This allowed a single disease to kill off its members one after another. Lihua had every right to be empress. However, her ancestry, something she could not control, stood in her way. Perhaps there was another reason as well. It involved becoming friendly with Jyokai's family, with an eye toward future diplomacy. Whatever had led to this, Empress Jyokai now held a higher status than others who lived in the imperial court. They were often said to live above the clouds. People who did not already know her personally might be expected to cower in her presence, and they did. He, I hope you like my snacks. It had been almost 6 months since Maomao had heard the dulcet tones of the preparer of these not-too-sweet treats. That was Yinghua, a lady-in-waiting who was eminently competent, but also had a quick ear for rumors and gossip. Maomao was glad to see Yinghua treated her the same way she always had, even though Maomao didn't dare do anything so foolish as to speak to her. The chief lady-in-waiting, Hongniang, was watching them both closely. Soon the minder stepped out. She wondered, suppose she could have one. Maomao wondered. Not everyone in the room had the capacity for such frivolous pondering. Beside Maomao, Yao was frozen like a block of ice. Nen kept a poker face, but the little glances she stole at Yao suggested she was worried about her. Once the women had become accustomed to making medical visits to the consorts in the rear palace, they were finally called upon to be part of a visit to Empress Jyokai herself. Jyokai had no doubt been looking forward to this. She had personally recommended Maomao to take the medical assistance exam. She considered Maomao's visit one of her all-too-few pleasures, and she was treating it much like a tea party. Yao asked Yinghua, where is Dr. Kan? Dr. Kan referred to Maomao's father, whose full name was Kan Liumen. Yinghua replied he went to examine the young prince. She continued, since you are all here, Lady Lingley and the ladies-in-waiting will all get checkups as well. She added, there is nothing to do in the meantime, so Lady Jyokai suggested tea. Hongniang must have gone to keep an eye on the exams. Princess Lingley had gotten big since Maomao had seen her last. When they arrived at the palace, the child who had been a toddler before ran to see the visitors. She seemed to have her mother's willful streak. Sadly, she did not remember Maomao, but she considered the newcomers as playmates. She followed them everywhere until Hongniang pried her away. The princess had looked quite dejected. Maomao figured they hadn't seen the last of her. At least she is healthy. They both are. Empress Jyokai sat across from Maomao. Her eyes sparkled, eager for any hint of an amusing, titillating, or generally interesting story. I unfortunately do not have one, and even if I did, I probably could not talk about it. She did have some tales to tell about the commander of the military, but she preferred not to speak of him and chose to keep them to herself. Yinghua sat herself down with them, saying, "I would love to hear some kind of juicy story." "Don't you have anything?" Maomao thought, always with the wheedling. If she could have conjured up some engaging anecdote on demand, people might have considered her a better conversationalist. Unfortunately, chit-chat was not her strong suit. Someone most unexpected volunteered, however. It was NN. "I have a story, though I don't know if it's exactly the kind you want to hear." "Ooh, really? It's about something that happened long ago. Is that all right? I can't wait to hear it," Jayukai said, full of curiosity. NN, normally so reticent, began to tell the tale. Long ago there were two chefs. They found themselves pitting their cooking skills against each other. This wasn't just a matter of pride. They were also competing to earn a place as the head chef of a rich man's household. One of the chefs was born and raised in that land. The other chef was a young up-and-comer from another place. We will call them chef and young chef. The competition involved cooking the master's favorite foods, eggs and dumplings. He loved mushrooms too, so some expensive ones were prepared for the chefs. Both competitors were seasoned cooks. They could demonstrate their skill even with the plainest dishes. By all rights, there should not have been much difference between them. For young chef, things did not go well. The eggs came out especially poorly, and they were not in good shape to be presented to the master. Young chef at least managed to whip up some dumplings. However, when the master tried them, he flew into a rage and threatened to have young chef killed on the spot. Young chef was completely befuddled. The food had been prepared using only the ingredients that were provided. Those ingredients should have been identical to the ones the other chef was using. What in the world had gone wrong? It was not so much a story as a riddle, Maomao thought. She looked at NN and understood she saw this as a kind of test. "Do you know why the dishes turned out so wrong?" she asked, looking at Maomao. The situation felt strangely familiar. Did young chef simply make a mistake with the recipe? Yinghua asked. She still seemed the most domestic of them all, just as she had been when Maomao lived and worked at the Jade Pavilion. Being young, after all. Yes, but she is still a first-rate chef. Otherwise they wouldn't have summoned her from so far away. While NN gave this explanation, her mistress Yao sat quietly, intensely focused on the ripples in her tea. This must have been a serious mistake. If the dumplings had produced such a furious reaction, they were talking about a mistake on the level of mixing up salt and sugar. Perhaps the chef's sense of taste was impaired. No, that didn't seem likely. Maomao thought it was more probable that something had been wrong with the flavor from the beginning. "A few questions," she said, raising her hand. "Go ahead," NN replied. "What sort of water was used for the cooking? Isn't water just water?" "You wouldn't deliberately use seawater or something, would you?" Yinghua objected. Maomao would have shaken her head, but NN did it first. It wasn't seawater. However, fresh water was very valuable in this place, so it was common to use salt water for anything that wasn't going to be drunk. The water there was hard to begin with, and the place produced rock salt, so it was common to add some. That meant a chef who did not know the qualities of the local water well could end up cooking with salt water without realizing it, Maomao said. That earned a nod from NN. Yinghua clapped her hands as if it suddenly made sense to her. She did some cooking around the Jade Pavilion herself, and she seemed to have realized what must have happened. Empress Jayukai, though, continued to look perplexed. "Would it really be that bad to boil your dumplings with salt water?" she asked. Maomao answered the question. "You take dumplings out of the water as soon as they are heated through. They float to the top, and that is how you know they are done. The salt in the water would change things. It would make the water heavier, meaning the dumplings would float before they were fully cooked. So the dumplings were undercooked." "Yes, ma'am," Maomao said. NN nodded. Apparently Maomao had the right answer. "What about the eggs, then? Would salt water have anything to do with that?" Yinghua said. "If we knew exactly which egg dish was cooked and exactly which ingredients were used, I believe we could answer that question too," Maomao said. "What do you think they cooked then, and what do you think they used?" NN replied, "I am going to guess steamed egg custard and hen of the woods mushroom. Hen of the woods was a luxury ingredient in some places." It was the first thing Maomao thought of when NN mentioned mushrooms. She assumed the young chef wanted to avoid overcooking them because their pleasant texture is part of what makes them enjoyable to eat. However, Raw hen of the woods can be used to soften meat. Presumably the egg did not set correctly. Oh, Yinghua's eyes sparkled with interest. That is exactly right, NN said, even raising an eyebrow. She remained mostly expressionless, but it seemed to take the wind out of her sails how readily Maomao had answered her. For some time now, NN had been more talkative than normal. By contrast, Yao had fallen silent. She was looking at the ground, almost as if she were embarrassed. Well, what happened to them? What happened to young chef? Yinghua asked. Oh, do not worry. They were rescued by another fine personage. They did not become the chef at that rich man's mansion, but they did find work at another household. This household was home to someone who wished to eat decent egg custard. Fortunately, this young lady was the daughter of someone young chef already knew. Well, that's good to hear, Empress Jayukayu laughed. Yes, milady, young chef had a little sister, and because of this they were both saved from having nowhere to go. The corners of Inen's mouth crept up. Wow, so she can smile. The expression was kind, and it seemed to be directed at the bashful Yao. I see. Maomao thought she understood why Inen had chosen to tell this particular story. Maomao's choice to keep her peace about it and feign ignorance was her own form of kindness. The chat seemed as pleasant to Empress Jayukayu as it did anxiety-inducing to Yao and the others. After Inen's story there was some friendly gossiping. Then Maomao's old man returned and there was a clamour. Hongniang was there holding the crown prince with Princess Lingli beside her. Liu Humen announced that the child was the picture of health. Jayukayu said that was wonderful to hear, and he looked deeply relieved. The infant's teeth were already coming in. Gleams of white could be seen when he opened his mouth. I have some concerns about weaning him, Liu Humen told Hongniang and the Empress. People's bodies tolerated things differently. You could not give babies honey. Also, fish or wheat could cause an allergic reaction. When you introduce new foods into the prince's diet, do it little by little. Introduce only one new food at a time. If you started the child on several new foods at once, it would be impossible to tell what the problem was if he had a bad reaction. This is the emperor's own son we are dealing with, Maomao thought. Commoners, particularly those who lived in the poorer quarters, did not worry about giving a baby the wrong food. They often had no food to give it at all. Yao and Enen listened attentively to what Liu Humen was saying. The quack doctor was also taking notes. Jayukayu asked if it would be safe for the prince to appear at his presentation, and her voice held a note of worry. She said truthfully that she would not recommend keeping him in an unfamiliar setting for very long. Children find it tiring. He might burst out crying when everyone was supposed to be quiet, or he might need his diaper changed. He could also get hungry. 2 years earlier, Princess Lingli had come to one of the garden parties, and it had been a challenging experience. They had to put warm stones in her cradle to help keep her from catching a cold. This presentation would be even longer than that. Jayukayu said, I will tell His Majesty I think our boy shouldn't stay very long. Liu Humen replied, Thank you for understanding, ma'am. Maomao could see why the Empress might be concerned. Her son was only one of the Emperor's children. Princess Lingli was also among them, and so was Consort Lihua's son. He had a claim to the throne as well. Maomao did not believe Lihua would do the unthinkable, but others with a lust for power might not be so scrupulous. Lihua could not control everyone who might try to harm the prince. Others existed whom she did not know or could not influence, and they might be plotting against the crown prince. In the past, a palace lady had attempted to poison one of the consorts. She had done it out of love for her mistress, and entirely without the consort's knowledge or consent. Her plot had failed. Anyone who wished for Consort Lihua to be the mother of the nation would see the current crown prince as an obstacle. This obstacle needed to be removed. Yes, there were many dangers. Speaking of potential dangers, it had been some time since Maomao had seen Jinchi last, but where did he stand in all of this? He had his own claim to the succession. Jinchi would come after the crown prince and Consort Lihua's child. Normally, an infant would not have been named crown prince. He would have been given more time to grow and to be observed by those around him. Jinchi did not seem interested in becoming emperor. He had been happy when the prince was born and even hoped to become a common advisor. However, the decision was not his to make, so how will everything work out? Maomao wondered, gazing at the prince's hand. It was as red and as delicate as a maple leaf. Is it over already? When will you be coming back? Asked Empress Jayuko. She wanted to keep chatting. Hongyang stood silently beside her. They were just about to leave the Empress's residence when footsteps came pounding up behind them. It was Yinghua. Stop that, it's unseemly, Hongyang said. She was restraining herself to a quiet reprimand because the doctors were present. Maomao knew that Yinghua would feel her knuckle later. I believe you left something here. Would you please come and get it? Yinghua said, tugging on Maomao's wrist. She was grinning. As soon as they were out of sight of the others, she let Maomao go. Did I really leave something? Maomao asked. Oh, of course not. I just made that up, Yinghua said, unless maybe this counts. She pressed something into Maomao's palm. It was a hair stick with a jade ornament. The ornament bore Jayukai's symbol. Maomao had received a necklace of the same material when she served at the Jade Pavilion. Lady Jayukai had them made for all her ladies in waiting when she became empress. I have one too. That is nice, but I am not one of her ladies. She had an extra one made for you, hoping you might return. She asked me to give it to you just now. She said it would be a waste to leave it lying around. If that is true, then it would be rude not to accept her gift. However, Maomao now knew there was significance in accepting a hair stick. Lady Jayukai wishes you would continue working for her. You can return anytime you feel like it, Yinghua said. Easier said than done, Maomao thought. It was a tremendous opportunity, not the kind that came along every day. On some level, it was a shame to have to turn her down. Maomao believed that working for Empress Jayukai would be pleasant in its own way, but she just wasn't a good fit. It wasn't only about social status. Maomao's personality was a little different from what the Empress was used to. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Oh, that's right. People would ask questions if the hair stick were the only thing I gave you. Yinghua gave Maomao 3 paper packages that smelled faintly of butter. Share these with the other girls, all right. I know you like savory stuff better, she said, so she even had an appropriate gift ready. Maomao took the snacks and made her way back to the front entryway, where the others were waiting. Chapter 10, Covertops. The damp, stagnant air was disgusting. The humidity made his hair cling to his neck. Jinshi sat in his office and regarded the pile of paperwork with a mounting desire to flee. There was little more depressing than doing administrative busywork during the hot, rainy season. Jinshi brushed the hair off the back of his neck. He sat up in his chair and flipped some pages. The characters were running a little. Perhaps someone had handled the paper with sweaty hands. He heaved a sigh and picked up the cup of tea. It was served cold, sitting on the corner of his desk. He let the tea ripple in the cup. When did it appear there? He felt as though it had been left when he went to the bathroom a few minutes ago. Who put this tea here? He asked the official in the office with him. Geishan had returned to the emperor and was no longer present. Basin would return when he had fully recovered. In the meantime, Jinshi was making use of a bureaucrat who had a particular gift for paperwork. A court lady brought it while you were away from your seat, sir. Jinshi was only human. Nature sometimes called even on him. It was strange for anyone to bring him tea at that exact moment, especially a lady of the outer court. A guard was always posted at the door to his office. The only time the guard wasn't there was when Jinshi left the office, such as to use the toilet. The guard went with him. Maybe the woman had known this would happen. Jinshi's office was usually off-limits to court ladies. He remembered when he had been pretending to be a eunuch, the women had actually fought over who would bring him his tea. Even after he left the rear palace, women would sometimes sneak bits of their hair or nails into his snacks. They did this as a love charm, or simply charged in when he was alone and tore off their clothes. It was nothing but trouble. The bureaucrat assigned to him was skilled with paperwork, but he didn't seem to know the details of Jinshi's situation. Jinshi opened a drawer in his desk and removed something wrapped in cloth. He carefully unwrapped it, revealing a silver spoon. He held the spoon with the cloth and used it to stir his tea. The shining silver quickly turned cloudy. Jinshi was grateful his assailant had used a nice, obvious poison. The blood drained from the official's face as he watched. In fact, Jinshi wanted him to see this to judge his reaction. At least the man understood what the besmirched silver signified. He truly hadn't known about the poison, it seemed. Jinshi gave the spoon to the guard at the door. The guard didn't even blink as he rewrapped the utensil and put it in the folds of his robes. His relief would come soon. He would likely hand the spoon along after that. "Can you describe the woman who brought this?" Jinshi asked the bureaucrat. Well, the man began. He was quite flustered and did not give much useful information. She was young, she was not very tall. At least this proved one thing. The man was dedicated to his job. He had been so focused on his paperwork that he hadn't taken special note of the woman who had walked in. Jinshi observed incidentally that there was a cup of tea on the bureaucrat's desk. It was half empty. He sighed.